Well, do you mind closing that door?
No.
It's tilted. Anyway, I think it's on. It's like, thank you, Dex. All right. Well, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
This nice November night. Class 9. Yeah. It's on. Thank you. So class 9 will be doing the Book of Kings. But we're just gonna do a little review. Last week, there's a few, I was watching the video over, and there was a few mistakes I made. So I wanted to brush that out before we continue. So last week, we can just turn so we can verify. So it was the book of Ruth. Book of Ruth. So I said initially she was married to a Moabite. No, she wasn't. She was married to a Jewish man because Naomi, her mother-in-law, is Jewish. It says it in, when I get to Ruth, sorry, I'm in the right place. So that's 1. And then that's verse 1. All right, so chapter 1, verse 1. She's married to a Jewish man, or in the land of Jerusalem. Remember, they went over the Jordan to go to the territory of Moab, and So anyway, that's where she's from. Yes.
When it says in verse 4, now they took wives of the women of Moab.
Yeah, the wives are Moab. Oh, no, I said last week, I'm making a correction. Last week I said the husband that they were initially married to,
okay.
the husbands that were initially married to. I don't know why I said they were Moab, from Moab. They weren't, so I just wanted to make that. And then Uzzah, remember when he touched the ark, and so me and my wife actually looked into it. So in Chronicles, it says that he's from the tribe of the Levite. The problem is, when we were searching, the Levites, when they're carrying the ark, they're not even supposed to look into it, or they're not even supposed to touch the ark. So that's why God took his life. So just wanted to make that correction. So Uzzah was in the tribe of the Levites. And then Boaz, and so I don't know, last week I was kind of making a humorous joke even, but then I felt bad because I don't want people to think that that's my humor. And then also I was too excited because I've seen that years ago and I wanted to present it. So I said in the beginning that Boaz is B-O-A-S, but it's really Z, and that's why I think Rosie said like spelling is important, because right in the end of it, I wanted to make sure I was saying as, not the other word, okay? So, but again, it was fun, but then I was like, no, because I do work with kids and I don't want people to have that misconception, like that's my language or that's my humor. So for those who were viewing it last week, I apologize. There's a lot of information. But like I told you, I'm not here to be defensive, to be right, but I want to be accurate. All right. So just wanted to clear those up before we start class tonight. All right. So let's turn to Proverbs 29:18, please. And this is going to be kind of the theme of the night. Proverbs 29:18. 8 part. All right. So where there is no revelation or vision, the people restraint. People cast off restraint, but happy is he who keeps the law. There's another part like when there is no vision, my people perish. Again, this will be the theme of the night. We're just going to rehearse a little bit on David that we did last week, but then for the beginning of Kings, we get to see firsthand what happens when this verse is getting applied to. Okay, so let's begin. So, class 9. Now, last week, God's covenant with David, 2 Samuel 7. David desired to build a house for the Lord. I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of God dwells within curtains. 2 Samuel 7:2. God promises this. David's son would build God's house. David and his line would rule over Israel. David's name would be great. David will have a kingdom of the land and people. David's kingdom and throne will last forever. David's prayer in 2 Samuel 7:18-29. We did this last week. Just wanted to come back to it because, again, we're going to see here where this promise only lies in one nation. So the nation does get divided. I'm just going to hold up here. So we have worksheets where we have, later on we'll go over, but we have the two kingdoms divided. So we have Judah and Israel. And what's cool here with this graph is they have the thumbs up, or no, thumbs up, the thumbs down, and then maybe right in the middle. And that was actually, if we look at the first three kings, Saul, David, and Solomon, and they both each reigned for 40 years each. And that was the only time where the nations were united. And so here Solomon was kind of like even. It was not even good or bad. And we'll go into it tonight. But again, one side of the family tree of David is you have good and bad, but then the other opposite end, not David's descendants, not actually, there's a verse where we go over, they were not even looking for God. They were not even interested in worshiping God. And here's the result. All thumbs down. There's no good king. This is what happens where we put God out of our way, right? So again, these worksheets and this little cool graph, I couldn't find it online. I wanted to print it out so you guys can have a nice clean page, but these were from my notes, my Barber College notes. So again, bear the little graph. And then I don't know if you have free time, maybe over the holiday, you want to go by each king and see how they rule and then write little notes. It's not a homework assignment. Again, this is just a neat graph to organize like who ruled and how long and what they did and if they were for God or not for God. So again, this covenant is to David. All right, so let's turn to 2 Samuel, please. 2 Samuel. So we talked about his last words. Kind of wanted to talk about this would be chapter 24. All right, so just before we get there, again, we're just rehearsing some of these slides that we had last week. David and the throne, 4 elements of his promise to David. The dynasty, it would remain in his family. Everlasting throne, definite symbol of power. Everlasting kingdom, realm, a reign of influence, worldwide impact in Psalm 89, 25 through 27. And we said in Psalm 89, it actually tells the account of David transferring power and David not be able to build the temple of God. And we said the reason why is because he shed too many innocent blood. He was a man of war. But again, God's covenant, right? He had said that it would still reign in his family and the temple will be built. So, David and his troubles. Remember, he was a believer who had troubles. I mean, There's a lot of us that were believers that have troubles, and then, but his sin with Bathsheba kind of was the most thing that was really dividing. Well, not dividing, but remember we said like sometimes our sin can find us out, or sometimes it can be so heavy, and we looked at that verse, and then here we came to the conclusion: 4 sons that died, the baby that died. But we said last week about children and the age of accountability, where like God gives a certain period for kids, maybe that can't comprehend or even not fully develop or understanding, they go right to heaven. Last week there was like some tough discussions, I know, but like this is Bible college, right? Like we gotta hear these hard things too. Ammon with Tamar, and then Absalom. We said a little bit about it last week. The rebellion with David, and then Adonijah. We're gonna go actually into it. The first, what's that? 1 Kings chapter 1. We're gonna talk about him, and then numbering the people. I really didn't get into this one. But the reason why God hated the fact that David was numbering the people, because one, God had already given David and the people the territory. And this is kind of what kings do. Kings want to see how large their armies are. And so it was actually 1.5 million men in the army. But again, God didn't want him to count it, right? Just like God didn't want kings to have horses, multiply horses, right? Because God does the victory. And so, yes, the reason why numbering the people, he was angry. But then also David knew, he actually regretted in 2 Samuel 24 verse 10. He actually regretted that he did that. He knew he was in the wrong when he was doing that. So again, God didn't want the land, the territory that he possessed, he didn't want it extended or expanded. But here David is counting having the census of how many men he has, or the army he has. But again, God fights our battles. So this is the reason why he didn't want that. And then in First Kings chapter 1, Adonijah, here we go, that's how you say it. Adonijah, he was actually in Kings chapter 1 verse 5, and Adonijah exalted himself, saying, I will be king. And he prepared himself a chariots and horsemen and 50 men to run before him. So in his mind, he is the oldest son, right? In his mind, he is the oldest son. And just like how every nation does, the oldest son gets the next reign. But here, Nathan, it says in 1 Kings 24 and 27, Nathan has a whiff of Adonijah planning to take over. And by the way, he's setting up, he's not even announced king yet, but he's setting up policies, he's setting up government order. And David, he's old of age, so he's not even aware what's going on. And so, again, Nathan had a whiff of it or heard of something, and then he went to tell Bathsheba. And so in verse 24 of chapter 1 through 27, and Nathan said, my Lord, O God, have you said, prior to that, he talks to Bathsheba, and then Bathsheba goes to David and Nathan too. And here in verse 24, and Nathan said, my Lord, O God, have you said Adonijah shall reign after me, and he shall sit on my throne? For he has gone down today and has sacrificed oxen and fatted cattle and the sheep in abundance, and has invited all the king's son and the commanders of the army, and Abiathar the priest, and look, and they are eating and drinking before him. And they say, long live King Adonijah, in verse 26. But he has not invited me and your servant. So they have this account before David. So then David said in chapter 28, the King David answered and said, call Bathsheba to me. So she came into the king's palace or presence and stood before the king. And the king took an oath and said, as the king lives, who has redeemed my life from every distress, just as I swore to you, the Lord of God of Israel, saying, assuredly Solomon your son shall be king after me, and he shall sit on my throne in my place. So I certainly will do this day. So this is all chapter 1 of Kings. So that was verse 28 through 30. So Solomon gets but he gets promoted, or he's announced that he is king. But Adonijah, he's angry, obviously, right? He's the oldest son. He should be next up. But then eventually he finds his way, adding to the 4 sons that died. And then the reason, who remember last week why there were 4 sons that died? What did he do? Remember last week? Go ahead, Dex.
When Nathan asked David what should happen to the man, David said he should be punished fourfold.
Yeah. So judgment, right? So remember what we said about judgment. Like, be careful what you say, right? Because unfortunately, like 4 folds, 4 of his sons died. The result of what he said about Nathan brought up, like, oh, what if a man went to steal, and he says, well, that man should be punished 4 folds. And so we just be careful when we judge, especially as believers, right? It's not highly recommended. But anyway, so then Nathan confronts David, and then we said that, thou art the man, judgment promise on David's house. I sinned against the Lord, David life spared, but the baby would die. Then we talked about this is the picture of the baby dying. But like he said in his words, like, I shall not see him. Oh, no. He shall not see me, but I shall see him, knowing that he will be in heaven. David had troubles. Again, he was a man of trouble. Absalom, his son, was hunting him down at one point. But of all these troubles, these are the words that he was saying. Remember we said about David being in the field. Like the preparation of David's life, right? Like your private moments helps you in the public eye, right? The way you worship God privately is what comes out publicly. And here David, having a heart, why was he a man after God's heart? These are the reasons, these are the things that he was saying in Psalm 51, verse 1. Blot out my transgressions. Wash me and cleanse me. This is all in Psalm 51. Truth in the inward parts, clean heart, right spirit. Testify to others the grace of God in Psalm 51, 12 through 13. Verse 17, a broken spirit, a contrite heart. This is what God looks for. This is what happens when we think in the lines or the level with God, right? Like, these are the kind of the rhemas, the manna even that he was receiving. Psalm 3 verse 2. Now this is in his trouble. Now there is no help for me in God, right? Shield, glory, lifter of my head. Verse 7. Save me. You have smitten all my enemies on the cheekbone, broken the teeth of the ungodly. Psalm 3 verse 8. Salvation belongs unto the Lord. Notice in all David's Psalms, it starts like heavy, and then it's always like, well, God, you, like, there's always like a climax even, right? Like, it goes like, it's down, it's low, it's kind of depressing, but then it's always uplifting, knowing that God will deliver him. Again, in his troubles, right? Another one, Psalm 28. Unto thee I will cry, O Lord, my rock. Speak peace to the neighbors, but mischief is in their hearts. They regard not the works of the Lord, nor the operation of his hands. Psalm 28, verse 8. The Lord is the saving strength of his anointed. Again, all this is in his trouble. Psalm 63. Early will I seek thee. Thy loving kindness is better than life. Thy right hand upholds me. Like, how many times would you need to reassure yourself, right? In the trouble, you need these promises, right? You need to hear them. You need to say them. You need to rehearse them, meditate it day and night in Psalm 1 verse 2. Also in Psalm 63 verse 9, but those that seek my soul to destroy shall go into the lower parts of the earth. Psalm 63 verse 10, the king shall rejoice in God. The mouth of them that speaks lies shall be stopped. So again, David with all these troubles, but he knew God was with him. Even remember what we said about when he went to Moab, right? We went to the territory of Moab hiding from Absalom. And then what we said, like, okay, the reason why he's in Moab is because he has family there. So there's times when if you're in trouble, go to your family. But then we said, well, we know that family don't want you to stay there long. But regardless, it's like, of all the trouble, like we also said, like, David, most of his kingship was running. He was running, right? It was troubled. Maybe not the best example. Actually, he had many wives. Not a great example as a father. There was a lot of things that he was not doing well in the public eye, the natural eye, right? But here God said, no, this is the man after my own heart. So David's temple did come. So in 2 Samuel, I told you to turn there, I'm sorry. 2 Samuel 24, 18 through 25 has this account, the altar of the threshing floor. So here will be the place where Solomon will build the temple. By the way, Solomon building this temple was the easiest thing because David left behind materials. David also gave them the design to build the temple. So all he had to do was follow the blueprint of how to build it, right? But here, this was the location, right in 2 Samuel 24, 18 through 25. This is the location. In verse 25 says this, and David built there an altar to the Lord, and offering burnt offerings and peace offerings. So the Lord heeded the praise of the land, and the plague was withdrawn. So the reason why there was a plague, because he made that consensus, right? Like God didn't want him to number the people. So what he did, he killed a lot of the people, right? And so, but he makes this altar. But right in that same location is where the temple, Solomon's temple, will be built on, okay? No, it would be Solomon's temple because he would build it. But yes, no, you're right. It would be David's in construction or I don't know how you say it. Like he's the architect. Yes, thank you. He's the architect, and Solomon builds it though. So, and you will hear Solomon several times, like when he's talking to the Lord, he's like, "Well, Lord, the temple that I built." But anyway, he kept referring that, and then we said here the tabernacle of David. In that day will I rise up to the tabernacle of David that is fallen, and close up the branches thereof, and I will raise up his ruins, and I will build it as in the days of old. Amos 9:11. Remember what we said. There's no tabernacle of David, right? Where is the ark? It's in the house. It's not in the tabernacle. It's not in the temple, right? So what does God really desire? The heart of a believer, right? Because we know in 2 Corinthians 3, we actually are that temple, right? We actually are the place where God resides or dwells in, right? This is the importance, and this is why David was a man after his heart. Like God really didn't want really a temple or place, but the tabernacle of David is not just the place, but it's the heart. Like this is where God wants to dwell. All right? Okay, so that was a little review. Now, let's go to 1 Kings. All right, so 1 Kings, chapter 1, we talked about Adonijah. Okay, so the book of Kings. So in the Jewish books, they write these books as former prophets. That's what they will call it. Jeremiah, not permitted to marriage, but he, during the captivity, people not listening or trying times for him, But Samuel was responsible for Judges and Ruth. Chronicles, it was Ezra the priest. All right. So again, I'll say that again. Samuel was responsible for Judges and Ruth. Chronicles was Ezra the priest. Now, we don't know who wrote Kings, the book of Kings. We can all speculate. Because Solomon had writers, like maybe there was an account where he's telling them what to write. But again, it's kind of an unknown who wrote this book. All right. And like we said earlier in our sheet here, Saul reigned for 40 years. Okay. And this is why it excited the nation, because they wanted a king, just like every other nation. Kind of be careful what you ask for, because then we see the end of Judges, what happens when there's no king found in the land. And then here, David reigned for 40 years. And again, actually, this was a prosperous year when he was reigning. But again, Solomon had, like, and if you see the sheet, it's like medium, right? It's not good or bad. And we see why right in the beginning. So the transition, it's not really an easy one, but it's one appointed. Remember, we said Adonijah was trying to be king, and then was angry about him not being the next king. But Solomon was appointed. 1 Kings chapter 1, verse 28. He was appointed, proclaimed by David that he would be king, and acknowledged. Son of David of Bathsheba. Remember the relation that she has. Her husband was Uriah. And actually, what's ironically is when David's mentioned in all the mighty men, he's actually, his last words, he's mentioned Uriah last. And the thing is too, it's kind of, okay, like Bathsheba, David had many wives, right? Not a great father. And why Solomon? Well, what Nathan told Bathsheba. If Nathan never told Bathsheba what Adonijah was up to, I don't think Solomon is next up, to be honest. The struggle for the throne, we mentioned that with Adonijah. Again, he was already like planning to be king. I mean, I don't blame him. He's really the next up. Conspiracy of death, political maneuvering, and a visit from God, which we'll talk about right now. 1 Kings chapter 3. So turn with me there, please. All right, here we go. Now, in verse 3, Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father David, except that he sacrificed and burned incense at high places. Now the king of Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on the altar. Okay? Then in Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night. And God asked, "What shall I give you?" And Solomon said, "You have shown great mercy to your servant David, my father, because he walked before you in truth and righteousness and uprightness of the heart. With you, you have continued this great kindness for him, and you have given him a son to sit on his throne, as it is this day. Now, O Lord," verse 7, "Now, O Lord, my God, you have made your servant king instead of my father David. But I am a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in." Verse 8, "And your servant is in the midst of your people, whom you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to be numbered and counted. Therefore, give to your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this great people of yours?" Verse 10, "The speech pleased the Lord, that Solomon had asked the things. Then God said to him, because you have asked these things, and have not asked long life for yourself, nor have asked riches for yourself, nor have asked the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern justice. Behold, I have done according to your words. See, I have given you a wise and understanding heart, so that there has not been anyone like you before, nor shall any like you arise after you. In verse 13, and I have also given you what you have not asked, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be anyone like you among the kings all your days. And so if you walk in my ways and to keep my statutes and my commandments as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your days. Then Solomon awoke, and indeed it had been dreamed, and he came to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, offered up burnt offerings and offered up peace offerings, made a feast of all servants. Okay, and that's it. So God visited him in the dream, and he asked for wisdom. Think with me here. What do you think Bible college is? Like, we're asking God for wisdom, right? To discern, to help us, and for not just us, but for his people. And so because Solomon wanted that request, God honored him with honor, riches, and peace, right? There was no wars in his time. He had money, he had riches, as far as the eye can see, and he was honorable. And we see in 1 Kings 10 who comes to visit him in that honor. Okay? So then this happens. This story here, 1 Kings 3. Okay? And maybe 1 Kings 3, 16 through 28 has this account. There was 2 women who had 2 babies, one of each to each woman. One woman rolled over, killed her baby. The other baby, obviously, still alive. The next day, they go to King Solomon. Actually, this sets the stage of how much his wisdom is being mentioned throughout the region because of this story, because of this account. So then the woman, the woman baby that died, told King Solomon, hey, she took my baby, the one that was living. Now, King Solomon, in his wisdom, in verse 24, says this, then the king said, bring me a sword, so that they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, divide the living child in 2, and give half to one and half to the other. Verse 26, then the woman whose son was living spoke to the king, for she yearned and with compassion for her son, and she said, oh, my lord, give her the living child, and by no means kill him. But the other said, let him be neither mine nor hers, but divide him. So the king answered and said, give the first woman the living child, and by no means kill him, and she is his mother. And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had rendered, and they feared the king, and they saw that the wisdom of God was in him in administrating justice. Okay, what was it that made him decide to make this decision? I know it's the account, but what was it? Why did he make that decision? God gave them wisdom? Verse 26. What does it say there? Someone read that for me.
And the woman whose son was living spoke to the king, for she yearned with compassion for her son, and she said, oh my Lord, give her the living child.
Stop right there. Stop right there. Compassion, yearn. When you know wisdom, you know what love is. Let me say that again. When you know wisdom, you know what love is. And this is why we're in Bible college. This is why we want the wisdom of God. This is the only reason why. It's because of love, right? When I know wisdom, I know what love is. The woman yearned and had compassion. That's like his antennas were up, right? He knew. He's like, no, I know what love is. Like, I'm wise. I know this is going to be throughout the nations, right? Or throughout the region, right? But I know what love is, right? So when you have wisdom, you know what love is. All right? So then he had the privilege to build the temple. So it's Solomon and the temple, okay? Notice how I said it in words. All right? So that's from 1 Kings 5, chapter 5 through 7. And again, this is all according to the plans of David. So all he had to do was follow a blueprint. He had some of the material. He had wood. He had 2 pillars, precious stones. All right, and remember, he had many horses, so he's carrying it through all the desert, right? Here's a cool verse. And 1 Kings 6, verse 7. And the temple, when it was being built, was built with a stone finish. The query, so that no hammer or chisel or any iron tool was heard in the temple while it was being built. Now, so to just elaborate, they were doing all the measurements, all the chiseling, all the hammering outside of the temple. Outside of the temple. It wasn't found in the temple. I don't know how they're measuring it. I don't know how they're doing that. I mean, I'm using a tape because this is 2024, right? But they're measuring all that outside. Then they're carrying it all into the temple. And as they, let's say, and then, mind you, there's a lot of labor. That's a lot of men. That's a lot of workers working on this. Pulling all these heavy stones, precious stones, and then once they get into the temple, fits perfectly, right? It fits perfectly. Let's turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 12. 1 Corinthians chapter 12. First Corinthians chapter 12. Verse 12. For as the body is one and has many members, but all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Christ. Why am I mentioning this? In verse 12, in verse 14. For in fact, the body is not one member, but many. Verse 18. But now God has set the members, each one of them, in the body just as he pleased. Okay, verse 26. Now, I'm mentioning all this. I'm bringing in all this. It's like when we hear the word of God, and we know we're getting chiseled, and we know we're getting molded. But what happens when we're outside of here? What happens when we're outside? Are we continue getting worked on? Of course we are, right? If we're allowing, remember, like the word I'm trying needs to get out of our vocabulary, right? I'm allowing God to do a work in me. And while I'm outside of the church, I'm being worked on. I'm being chiseled. And then when I'm inside the church, I'm getting fed. I'm growing more. Then when I go outside, I'm continuing to be built up. Because as a body member, we fit perfectly in God's house. Perfectly. Oh, but I'm lame. Or I have sin in my life. Oh, I'm struggling. Oh, I'm not perfect. Yeah, but in the house of God, you're perfectly fit. Amen. You're perfectly fit. God is doing the work, right? Obviously, we don't see our own growth, right? And that's why it's great to be part of the assembly, right? You don't know your gifts until people start seeing it, right? You don't know your ministry or what God is doing in your life unless you're part of the body. Right? But here in verse 26 is key. And if one member suffers, all the members suffers with it. And if one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. And here's the beautiful fact. Like we have one person here, right? Just got a job acceptance. That's honor for all of us. We're all happy. Right? That's why we should not be no resentment, no judgment. That's why we're not like, oh, but oh, she has a nice purse, or she has some nice shoes. Like, who cares, right? Oh, he's built. Oh, no, he's skinny. No, we all fit perfectly in the house of God. Individually, we getting worked on. And let me say it again. When we're in the house of God, we hear, we receive it. We're outside of God, we're hearing and receiving, and we getting chiseled and we getting built. Obviously, we don't, like, I'm hearing music now, but obviously we don't hear a chisel and a hammer during our Sunday service. Because if we do, we're all distracted. I can't focus, right? But in our hearts, right? But they said when Peter spoke, they're like, you pierced our hearts. For what you said, you pierced our hearts. This is exactly what happens. It's exactly what happens. So let's go back to 1 Kings. 1 Kings. So we're getting chiseled, right? I love it. I love it. It's getting worked on outside of the temple. It's coming in perfectly. Boom. Fit. All right? Just like us, right? 1 Chronicles 28, verse 18, talks about the cherubims and the difference between the tabernacle and the temple. The tabernacle, the cherubims were facing each other, right? In the temple, it's facing the ark. That's the difference. And how this is set up. And that's in 1 Chronicles 28, verse 18, has that account. Angels are facing the ark. And obviously the picture's not doing justice, but there was over like 2,000 baths where they would do the sacrifices. When they had to cleanse the sacrifices. I'm sorry. When they had to cleanse themselves, there were like 2,000 baths in that temple. All right. Again, he had no problem building this, without no problem, because everything was like laid out for him to build this. All right. Just want to make sure I have all my points. In chapter 7, now something's surfacing in his heart. But Solomon took 13 years to build his own house. And he finished all his house. And he also built the house. Okay, so it said 13 years to build his own house, okay? And his house is actually bigger than the temple. It was bigger than the temple. Again, something is surfacing, all right? I forgot to mention the two pillars. The name, Jachin, is Jachin. Jachin means the two pillars that were there. Jachin means God will establish. So Jachin, God will establish. The meaning of the name, God will establish. The two pillars, right? Yeah, two pillars that are holding the building. God will establish. And then the other one is, let me find it. Boaz, B-O-A-Z, and it means in Yahweh is strength. In Yahweh is strength. So Jachin is God will establish. Boaz is in Yahweh is strength. There's meanings to these pillars. All right? Now, I know obviously it's a picture, but I know like it's so impressive, right? The temple is so big, it's so glorious. You would think God would be impressed with it, right? But remember we said earlier, David's tabernacle. Like, what does God really want, right? This one just want to reside in buildings, right? I mean, this was needed for that time for them to worship it out. He wants our hearts. He wants our hearts. Okay? All right. So Solomon and his prayer in 1 Kings chapter 8. Okay? And then here, 1 Kings chapter 8. He's praying for several groups, but in verse 42 of chapter 8, 42 through 44, this is because the temple is being placed, this is what he's saying in this prayer. For they will hear of your great name and your strength, your strong hand and your outstretched arm. And when he comes and prays towards the temple, hear in the heaven your dwelling place, and do according to all for which the foreigner calls to you, that all peoples of the earth may know your name and fear you, and do your people Israel, and that you may know that this temple, which I have built, like I told you, like he says a lot, is by your name. And when your people go out to battle against their enemy, wherever you send them, and when they pray to the Lord towards the city which you have chosen, and the temple which I have built for your name. Okay, you guys see like kind of what's happening here. Verse 45, then hear in heaven their prayer and their supplication, and maintain their cause. And verse 26, and when they sin against you, for there is no one who does not sin, you become angry with them and deliver them to the enemy, and they take the captive to the land of the enemy far and near. Yet when they come to themselves in the land where they were carried captive, and repent and make supplication to you in the land of those who took them captive, saying, we have sinned and done wrong, we have committed wickedness. Verse 48, and when they return to you with all their heart and with all their soul in the land of their enemies, who led them away captive, and pray to you toward their land, and which you gave to their fathers, the city which you have chosen, and the temple which I have built for your name. Okay, that's one portion. In verse 1 Kings 8:60, it says this, then all the people of Israel, all the people of the earth may know the Lord is God, and there is no other. Let your heart, therefore, be loyal to the Lord our God, and walk in his statutes, and keep his commandments as this day. Okay, now with Solomon's prayer, it was a place where Israel should turn her heart. It was a place for all peoples, remember we read earlier, the foreigners, to find the true God. It was a central focus of prayer, and it was a world mission. Now just think about it. Israel at this point has never had more wisdom than ever, had more riches than ever, more honor than ever. And here, this is a place where people would draw from, foreigners or Israelis alike, would come and pray to God in this way. All right, and 1 Kings 56, verse 56 is one of my favorite verses. Blessed be the Lord who has given rest to his people Israel according to all that he promised, that there has not failed one word of all his good promise, which he has promised through his servant Moses. Not one word. Not one word. Like this is what they would go to this temple and pray and thank God, thanksgiving, repentance, whatever the case may be. This was the central place, right? But I want to say this point. The foreigners will go there too. Now Israel, just like Israel was a place where their God was, how am I going to say this? Israel was a place where the world can see their God. It was not a place for them to hone in their riches, hone in all their glory, it was not like hoarder all that, like keep it to themselves. No, it was supposed to be outward, a mission. In Proverbs 29:18, my people perish. Why? Missions. They stopped being mission-minded. Solomon stopped being a missionary. Well, not a missionary, but stopped thinking about the mission and the things that he was doing for God. Right? In 1 Kings 9, if you turn there, 1 Kings 9, 4-7, I want you to see something here. Now, if you walk before me as your father David walked in the integrity of his heart and in righteousness, to do according to all that I have commanded you, and if you keep my statutes and my judgments, then I will establish the throne of your kingdom over Israel forever, as I promised David your father, saying, you shall not fail to have a man on the throne of Israel. Remember, we read that earlier in the class. The covenant that was established. So that's an unconditional covenant, okay? All right, verse 6. But if you or your sons at all turn from following me and do not keep my commandments and my statutes, which I have set before you, but go and serve other gods and worship them, Then I will cut off Israel from the land which I have given them, and this house which I have constructed for my name I will cast out my sight. Israel will be a proverb and a byword among all the peoples. Now it's conditional. It went from unconditional to regardless of how the prior verses. Because I promised David, not you, Solomon, unconditional, I got to stay faithful to what I told him. And this is what condition is. When you or your sons turn from my ways, right? The Bible is simple, right? The Bible has people, it has truth, and it has consequences. It's the same book, right? It's the same book. So here God is saying, okay, well, unconditionally, I have a covenant with David. But conditionally, if you or your sons turn, and then we see a decline. Well, we're not definitely with one side of the nation, but the other we'll see a decline, okay? So now he lost his way. Solomon lost his way. We have women, we have horses, we have gold, we have silver. Let's go to Deuteronomy. This is a little rehearsal. I know we went over it when we went over Deuteronomy, but Deuteronomy 17. Remember, this verse prophesied about King Solomon. All right? Deuteronomy 17, 14 through 18. And when you come to the land which the Lord your God is giving you and possess it and dwell in it, and say, I will set a king over me like all the nations that are around me. Verse 15, and you shall surely set a king over you, whom the Lord your God chooses, one from among your brethren, and you shall set a king over you, and you may not set a foreigner over you, who is not your brother. But he shall not multiply horses for himself. Okay, this is what he was doing. All right. Horses for himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt to multiply horses. For the Lord has said to you, you shall not return that way again. Neither shall he multiply wives, which is the first category, because it was so many, all right, of wives. And then where is it? I lost my place. Okay, horses. Okay, neither multiply wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall greatly multiply silver and gold for himself. Also, it shall be when he sits on the throne of his kingdom that he shall write for himself a copy of the law in the book from the one before the priests and the Levites. So remember we said like the book of Proverbs, Song of Solomon. Solomon wrote 3,000 proverbs in his living. Proverbs 29:18. I keep talking about it because it says when there's no revelation or there's no vision. Who wrote that? Who wrote that proverb? That was one of them that he regret writing. Because now we see the decline. And you know what's crazy? He lost his way. Not just the women or horses or gold and silver. It was not just that. It was not just that. It was the mission. He stopped the mission. That's why he lost his way. Yeah, these are added contributions. Not saying they don't make an effect. Here he says, don't do it. Don't multiply. Don't have a king that multiply. I don't want a king multiplying horses because I win the battles. I don't want natural man to ever say they've conquered anything. I don't want natural man that says they overcome anything. Okay, I'm in my soapbox right now. Like when people tell me I have overcome and I have done this and I have overcome. No, you haven't done nothing. It's the grace of God that's doing the work. He was chiseling your heart. He was hammering the parts that you were refusing to hammer. Now, obviously, I know what they're saying, right? Like, God has helped them through. But what I am saying is, we got to know that God is constantly working in our hardened hearts. Our natural heart is a hardened heart. Our new heart is what he fellowships with and continues to build. right? This is why in Ephesians, like, know the new man, right? Ephesians 1:17 maybe, or 3:17. But know the new man, right? So anyway, he's multiplying. There's a downfall. Now, I read it real fast, okay? Let's turn back to 1 Kings 3. 1 Kings chapter 3. I read it through real fast because I didn't want to give out this point. No, 1 Kings 3. 1 Kings chapter 9. No, go ahead. 1 Kings 3. 1 Kings 3. 1 Kings 3. Go ahead. It's like I have a surprise. I just want to give it, but no. Let's go 1 Kings 3. 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 4. 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 4. Now, Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father, except he sacrificed and burned incense at the high places. Verse 4. That was verse 3. And verse 4. Now the king went to Gibeon, and to sacrifice there, for that was the high place, the great high place. Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on the altar. Man, he is so religious, right? And then he's offering these things for God, right? Actually, I found this years ago in a plane when I was going to Haiti, and this was really cool. Remember in Exodus 33 when we said that we can be familiar with the presence of God? And when the stiff-necked people were outside of the tent, or outside, right? And then Joshua was in the tabernacle, but he was outside of the Holy of Holies, and Moses is face to face with God. We can be familiar with the presence of God. Well, we also can be familiar with the things of God. Because how many things it said there? How many? 1,000. Okay, keep note. 1 Kings chapter 9. 1 Kings chapter 9. Verse 25. This is right after the dedication of the temple, the prayer for the elders, for Israel, for foreigners. This is his own place being bigger than his own, than God's temple. The blessing, having wisdom, knowing love, having the riches. We're going to go right into 1 Kings chapter 10 shortly. All this, but here in verse 25 it says, now 3 times a year Solomon offered burnt offerings and peace offerings on the altar, which he had built for the Lord, and he burnt the incense with them on the altar, and that was before the Lord. So he finished the temple. Whoa, 3 times? Wait, it was 1,000. Now it's 3. Okay, you have all this. You know God is doing it. And now it's only 3? We can get familiar with the things of God. We gotta guard our hearts in doing that, right? We gotta guard our hearts in doing it's not mundane, it's not every day, right? Like the normal conversation on a work week on a Monday. Oh, it's Monday. Oh, it's another day. No, like our mentality as spiritual people is every day is a new day. Everything I do is in the eyes of God. Everything I do is fresh and renewed. Everything I do is precious and with the eyes of God, and I know it's for my growth. Here he's got familiar. Here's only a few times. And those 3 times a year, I don't know how many, it doesn't say it. But again, you're starting to see what's surfacing in his heart. You're starting to see it. Now in 1 Kings chapter 10, Queen Sheba comes, and I love this verse. In verse 7, it says, however, this is her, and verse 6 actually. Then she said to the king, it was a true report which I have heard in my own land about your words and your wisdom. Verse 7, however, I did not believe the words until I came and saw with my own eyes. And indeed, the half was not told to me. Your wisdom and your prosperity exceed the fame of which I heard. Now, I love this. Let's turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 3. Please, 2 Corinthians chapter 3. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 2. 2 Corinthians 3 verse 2 says this, you are epistles written in our hearts, known and read by all man. Clearly, you are an epistle of Christ, ministered by us, written not with ink, but by the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of flesh, and this is of the heart. You are written epistles. Ladies and gentlemen, this is outreach. When Queen Sheba comes from her region, and she says, I heard the things, but now I see it in your own eye. How important it is in our states, right? Even when I'm in my lowest state, just like David was, what I kept saying in the Psalms. Yes, he has a real trouble, but he always exalts Christ or exalts God, right? He always exalts him in the end. He's like, well, my enemies are before me. They want me dead, right? In a matter of speaking. But God, you would deliver them. I mean, you would deliver me from their hands. You were, and Lord, I'm even against you. I sinned against you in Psalm 51. But Lord, blot on my transgressions. Make me white as snow. Redeem me, Lord. How would this Old Testament saint know these finished work, sayings or quotes or the realization of who he is in God, right? This is what happens. We are written epistles, known and read by all men. So here, Queen Sheba comes. But this is the temple. Now, this was the temple. It's a little blurry. Apologize. This is when Queen Sheba goes and visits. Right here are the 12 lions, golden lions that he has, 12. Okay, 6 at each side. This temple is a lot bigger than the temple of God. There's a few guards, but there's a lot of women. Okay, just want to point that out because in First Kings, if you want to turn back there, 1 Kings chapter 11. Because I thought it was the women that was his downfall. No, it was worship. He stopped the mission. Sorry, he stopped the mission. 1 Kings chapter 11 says here in verse 1, but King Solomon loved many foreign women, and the daughter of Pharaoh, and the women of the Moabites and the Amorites. And this is what, and then in verse 3 he says, and he had 700 wives, princesses, and there's 300 concubines. And his wives turned away his heart. Now, the comment says, reading that, I'm like, oh, this is the reason. No, the reason was he stopped the mission. He stopped the mission. Okay? So, 700 wives, 300 concubines, full of wisdom, has everything he wants. Israel never been greater, wiser, richer, or peaceful. But the real failure was he lost his focus on mission. Proverbs 29, 17, right? I believe. He lost it. And then there's the downfall. And then in chapter 11, we see here the beginning of the nation splitting. 2 nations splitting. So, my goodness. Rehoboam, Solomon's son, he rules the southern kingdom, Judah. Jeroboam, he's Solomon's servant. He rules the northern kingdom. But the only reason that there's a division is because Jeroboam was trying to go to Rehoboam about a peaceful, they were workers, they were servants, and they just asked him, can you lighten up our yokes? Then Rehoboam goes and finds counsel, and they tell him, just go easy on them. They will be your servants forever. Just go easy on them. He refused that counsel, and then he tells Jeroboam and the group, no, we're going to actually go harder and on your yoke or your burden. We're going to go harder. And then there's the beginning of the friction of the two parties, right? Now, if he has wisdom, he would have understanding that he's the king. Rehoboam is the king after Solomon. He's the king. If it was peaceful, if he adhered of wisdom, but you know what he was lacking? What was he lacking? Come on, class. What was he lacking? Compassion. Love. Ooh. Because he doesn't know wisdom. He has to ask somebody. Did Solomon ever ask anybody? No, God's given him wisdom because he was seeking that. And the very things you do is what we're doing. That's Solomon, what he's doing. He said, God, give me discernment, give me wisdom, give me guidance. Solomon is going right to God with his wisdom. Rehoboam's going to a guy and not even and hearing that wisdom, which, by the way, if he followed suit, it would have been a lot smoother. But now the kingdoms are divided. And right there in your graph, right, the kingdoms are divided. Okay, the kings of Judah, southern kingdom, Rehoboam, and by the way, there's times where there are good kings, which we'll go over. There's some good kings. And then the kings of Israel, where Jeroboam, the servant of Solomon, and by the way, Solomon passed. So this is why there's a friction. This is why there's a division. The right side of the kings of Israel, and they all are down. They all are down. There's a verse too I want to find. It's a verse that said, 1 Kings 11, 28. Oh no, this is the reason why he was man of all valor. This is the reason why he was appointed officer. There's a verse where they said like they didn't want no dealings. I think. Okay, let's go to 1 Kings 1:20. Now, why is the left side of the graph? There's some good kings, right? 1 Kings 1:20 says this. It says, and as for you, my lord, O king, the eyes of Israel are on you, and that you shall tell them who will sit on the throne of my lord, the king, after him. Otherwise, it will happen when my lord, the king's rest with his fathers, and I and my son Solomon will be counted as offenders. And just then, no, that's not the place I wanted. That's not the place I wanted. I gotta find that later. I'm sorry. There's a verse where it said like, none of Jeroboam. Let me go to chapter 11. None of Jeroboam people wanted to deal with God. Verse 31, and he said to Jeroboam, take off your... No, that's not it either. Okay, I'll probably get back to it. But yeah, it does say that he didn't want any dealings with God. And here's the result. When you don't want no dealings with God or his counsel, everything's a downfall. All right, so Rehoboam could have dealt the situation a lot easier, a lot smoother, but he didn't, okay? Oh, no, that's too early. Okay. With Jeroboam, there was a plague because he dabbled in idolatry. 2 golden calves, and it comes up again. 2 golden calves that started in his time. Hezekiah is the one who destroys it, but that's later. That's the later kings. But he starts all this idolatry. Basically, there's a religion job openings because they're not going to Judah, right, where actually all the priests are. He makes this request: if you bring a bull, you will become a priest, right? Sounds like today, you take a 15-minute ordination, you become a pastor, right? So it's the kind of like watered down thing, right? So there's a job opening, religious job openings, but then there's diseases, right? And basically the north becomes south in their living because they're in idolatry and they have people that are not in proper offices. And the plague is affecting them and his family, okay? And he dies because of that, right? And then Rehoboam, he's still... he's a bad king, but he still had people in place. There were religious people in place who were appointed by God. And then mind you, maybe a couple of classes, the reason why the north gets taken over before the south is because they had more of they had more of the tribes or the nations that were not of them still still in the territory, right? But there was less of them in the southern nation. So this is why they were overtaken later. But this is why Assyria is the group that takes over. So basically, Jeroboam and his kingdom has no fruit. Has no fruit, right? This is what happens when we put God out of the equation. There's no fruit for that. All right? And then again, with the idol worship and the golden calf, there's two of them. Okay? And then like I said, King Hezekiah is the one who goes and destroys all of these idols eventually. All right? Okay. Now, man, I can't find that verse. Okay. Well, I'll find it maybe in the rap. Okay? All right. Let's keep on keeping. Okay? So Elijah, so there's a couple of figures here. So Elijah, the prophet from nowhere, right, suddenly appears in 1 Kings chapter 17. All right, nothing said of his family ties. Drought defines his power from God. Judgment on the storm god of Seon, Baal. He was led and fed by God. Remember the ravens, right? Ravens fed him. And then in the verse, James 5, verse 17, his name is mentioned here. He was a man of like passions, kind of like he was a man like us. All right. Okay. Just want to make sure got everything. Okay. And then, so again, this is a prophet, came out of nowhere. Don't know the ties, but they hear this man is being spoken of. And any time, remember we said this, at any time, especially in Judges, at any time, God is always appointing a man or a woman in that time, right? He's going to, and he uses a man like Elijah and Elisha, okay? All right. Now, Elijah, a miracle in 1 Kings 17 at the widow's house, all right? And it's funny, it's kind of ironic. He's asking for water, right? But there's a drought. So this is where this miracle comes out, and he's being known. What did the widow say? Oh, we have enough food and drink for us and me, my two sons, and then we'll die after. And then he says, no, go, give me a vase, give me, and I will do the work. But here it's ironically because there's a drought, and when he's asking that question, people know it's from God, right? Then the drought ends. Then he gets caught up. And the next time we see him is in Matthew 17:3. Remember, with Jesus, Moses, and Elijah, right? All right, so this is the next time we will see Elijah in the Gospels, right? He's in the Gospels. Remember we said that too. It was like 1,300 years for Moses died 1,300 years, and then Elijah maybe 900 years. I could be wrong with that. But in time, in eternity, there's no time. We live forever. If you want to know do we really live forever? There's your example. Elijah and Moses, two different time periods, showing up with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration, right? And this is your evidence, if you need any. Okay? Now, Elisha, faithful, served Elijah for 10 years, stayed close like Ruth, and modeled his leadership for others. In doing it, he had sons of prophets. In 2 Kings 2-6, he created a school of prophets. And because Elijah was a loner, and it's surprising that he even taught Elisha about the things that he was doing, right? But then Elisha is like, no, I should train up men. I should make a school. I should share this this knowledge of those who are seeking office. Okay, so he's the one who's creating this school of prophets, right? All right. Then has double of the miracles of Elijah. Okay, and then we'll look into that. Now Elijah miracles is first the drought, then the meal and the oil multiply. Remember with the woman, the widow woman. Okay. Child raised, fire falls from heaven, captive slain by fire, rain drought, and then waters of Jordan divided. Now there's 7 miracles. Now in the end of Elijah's life, Elisha said, I want double of your portions. Okay? Now, this was fresh because it's not just about the amount. He says, basically in terms, I want your ministry. I want your ministry. I don't want like the reward. I just want your ministry. Like sometimes I don't know why I misunderstood that. Like, why would he want double portion? Like, is that a reward? No, it's not a reward factor. He just wanted his ministry. Because Elijah's miracles was Jordan divided, waters healed, bears and mockers. And remember in this portion, they were mocking him because of his baldness. And this is what happens when you touch the office, right? Like God makes a way. And then these bears come out of the wood and attack. Waters and ditches, widow's oil supply, poison pot healed, and loaves multiply. So what? That's 7. And then here's another one because remember, he asked for the double portions, okay? A child raised to life, Naaman's healed, okay? And let's stop there real quick. All right, so that's 2 Kings chapter 5. So in this story, what is it? 2 Kings chapter 5. In this story, there's a man named Naaman who has leprosy, right? And then here's a servant woman is in the house, and she's serving him, and then he's wanting to be healed, and then she's the one offering like, hey, I know of someone who can probably heal you. So then he goes out, he sees this man, Elijah, and he tells Elijah, and then Elijah doesn't even leave his house. He just says, go and bathe 7 times. And Naaman was like, okay. He was angry at first, but then eventually he did. Leprosy is gone. But it's very interesting in this last part, in verse 18. After he got healed. Yet in this thing, this is 2 Kings 5:18. Yet in this thing, may the Lord pardon your servant when my master... Oh, no, I'm sorry. Let me go further up in verse 15. And he returned to the man of God and all his abides and came and stood before him. And he said, indeed, now I know that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. Now, therefore, please take a gift from your servant. But he said, as the Lord lives before whom I stand, I will receive nothing. And he urged him to take it, but he refused. So Naaman said, then if not, please let your servant be given 2 more loads of earth for your servant, and will no longer offer either burnt offerings or sacrifice to other gods, but to the Lord. Yet in this thing, may the Lord pardon your servant when my master goes into the temple, Rimmon, to worship there, and he leans on my hand, and I bow down to the temple of Rimmon. And when I bow down in the temple of Rimmon, may the Lord please pardon your servant in this thing. Verse 19. Then he said to him, go in peace. So he departed from him a short distance. Now, this is like maturity. You know, so many, I feel like sometimes we can be insecure of our own faith when people don't believe what we believe. And for instance, maybe personally, I know, when I was doing prison ministry, I know there was Catholics being there, but I'm not so fixated in trying to convert them to Christianity. I'm kind of busy trying to get them in the kingdom of heaven. So sometimes people take so much offense because they don't have your view or viewpoint, right? I can even go into other areas that can relate to. But here, Elijah doesn't say, no, don't worship Rimmon. You should know better. It was God that healed you, God of Israel. No, he said, go in peace. Right? Go in peace. But later that helped Naaman. And then just making that point, we don't always have to, Christ didn't defend himself. Amen. Think about it. Who is it? Was it, who's the king that said, Pilate, right? When King Pilate, Pontius Pilate said, who is the king of the Jews? Right? Oh, no. who's the king of Nazareth? And like he's like, okay, which one of the kings that he's not speaking to him? He like it could be a Pilate or what's the other one? Caesar? Was that Herod? Oh, and there was another ruler too. We do this Easter play every year. I should know all of them. But,
Caiaphas, Herod, and Pilate.
okay, which one is he didn't respond to? Was it the middle one? Was it? It was Pilate, right? Well, because even Pilate said, "What is truth?" So, like Jesus didn't respond. Like I don't have to respond to what I believe. Like okay, in defense in my faith, if people wanting to know what I believe, of course. But here, Elijah is securing himself. Say, yeah, go in peace, right? Like he doesn't like, but Raymond is not the God of it. No, he just said, go in peace. Like I would do, like God, you would know eventually that God is doing the work. But I don't have to always like stir people into a direction, right? Like hold people's hand in this spiritual walk. Like, yeah, go in peace. And so just want to say that. I could be off in saying this, but I'm just saying like, this is in the word, right? This is in the word. Okay, here's another point. When Paul saw Peter rejecting the Gentiles, was Paul nice about it? Or was Paul mad about it? Because he's like, wait a minute, there's no difference in what we believe. So in that defense, yeah, speak up, right? Like speak up in that moments. But in some moments where like maybe there's immature believers and they say something that's like off, like give people grace. Give people room, let people grow, right? Because maybe the hammering and the chiseling is not really that active, but eventually in time, the Spirit of God in them is going to do that work, right? My spirituality doesn't, like in this walk, was Paul in his chains by himself? What did he say? I'm just with these chains by myself. But he had a whole herd of disciples with him. But now he's in Rome, incarcerated, and he's by himself. Like, yes, it's a lonely walk in one aspect, right? It's a lonely walk in one aspect. I don't have to defend. Okay, so just want to, so this is the rest of the miracles, 14 of them. And then, by the way, this one happened after his death, when a man resurrected by touching his bones. So this is after he died. He still did a miracle, okay? All right, now, so Judah, going, and then what's the end of that? Okay, so in the beginning, going. 2 Kings 18 through 23, there's a decline of David's dynasty, okay? 2 Kings 24 to 25, capture of Judah, all right? Now, I'm going right to Judah because the northern kingdom, right? The northern kingdom, Jeroboam, the one he led first, 9 families, by the way, I think I have that written down. 9 families, 9 dynasties, 20 kings. None followed God. I still want to find that verse. None followed God. Someone can find that for me, that would be great. 2 Kings, so before Judah was getting attacked, or decline of Judah, the northern kingdom's already overtaken by Assyria, okay? The Assyrians, okay? Because of their idolatry, because of their substitute religious jobs, or substitute representatives of God, like they didn't want the real thing, they just wanted the fraction of it. Because of their idolatry, because of their not even want to following God, they're already captured. But here, they have a fighting chance. And we see some kings do a work, which we'll get into. But Judah had 20 kings. 8 were said to have done what was right in the eyes of the Lord. All right, so these 8 were there, okay? But not Hezekiah. Oh, no, so yeah, 8 was right in the eyes, but Hezekiah and Josiah were the only 2 that did what was right, okay? Because they were the 2 top kings in their time, okay? Now Hezekiah, the high king at one point, destroyed the brazen serpent. Remember, that sounds familiar? What book that we talked about the brazen serpent?
Genesis?
Genesis?
Oh, no.
Numbers, yeah. All right. So in Numbers, remember, but here the people, it became an icon or an idol in 1 Kings 18:4. So they turned that into an idol, right? So he destroyed that. Comprehensive reform. Idols were destroyed. High places torn down. Okay, remember I said about the 2 golden calves? He's the one that destroys that. Passover instituted. The Assyrians destroyed by God because after the northern kingdom was being already demolished, they're pursuing now the southern kingdom, but they're in the outskirts of it. Actually, they're in the outskirts of it. You see, there's actually 185,000 persons surrounding Judah right now. Okay, 185 in his time, Hezekiah's time. All right, and also the prophet Isaiah is also in this time because he writes this account. Actually, 3 times that this account is mentioned here in Kings, and Chronicles, and then Isaiah mentions this account when the Assyrians surrounded the place of Judah. Okay, now what Isaiah did was he spread the matter before the Lord. So whatever that means, he spread the matter before the Lord. He went to God, and then the angel of the Lord came and did damage. The angel of the Lord killed 185,000 of the Assyrians. Okay, they were destroyed right aside of the gate. Okay, because they were within Judah, they were not able to go out, so they were actually eating dove dungs, like the poop, because just for nourishment, because they couldn't go out and get resources because they were surrounding this nation. And so again, Isaiah spread the matter. All right. He spread the matter before the Lord. So 185,000 were killed, were slain. Okay. And then also, just want to make sure I got everything there. Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, Manasseh, a low point king, okay, 55 years of terrible reign. 55 years. Like, that's a long time, right? And because he practiced idol worship, executed prophets, shed innocent blood, you know how? There was times he would leave out babies to die, of their own. But then in the end of his life, he did repent in the end, but then he was captured by the Babylonians. Now the Assyrians are destroyed, but now the Babylonians come in. Okay, but he is taken away. But this is a low point, 55 years. When did he repent? Maybe it was like the last year of his reign, he repented. I don't know. But sometimes we, I want to say this graciously, like maybe if we really think about a lot what we do, like for 55 years or maybe prior to that, like him doing what he was doing, the idolatry, maybe there was maybe an opportunity where he could say, like David, David took that opportunity and said, Lord, blot out my transgressions, make me white as snow, like let me redeem the time, right? Don't let me in the pit, right? We said that too about, I don't want to dovetail. I just want to continue here. But we did say that we said that with a verse. In Romans. Okay. So in Romans, let's turn to Romans because there's a lot of facts and we just need a little Bible here. Romans chapter 13. Romans chapter 13. Verse 14. Remember we said this about Joshua. Remember when God told him, or told the nation to conquer each people that resided in the land. Remember we said about this verse. It says, but put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to fulfill its lust. Then remember what we said about the 3 things. Sin wants to take you further than you want to go. Keeps you longer than you want to stay. Sin will cost you more than you want to pay. And here, Manasseh Like how many years of the terrible reign that he could have just redeemed? Or, no, maybe in the idolatry, he's like, well, you know, I'm just a man, or I'm just a people, right? Like the continuance of it, like even the shedding of innocent blood. There's got to be a point where our conscience is not conscious, our spirit is really crying out, right? Okay, so that's the low point. Josiah was also a high point as a king. So there was two of them, real good kings. Became king at the age of 8, instituted the temple repairs, the book of God found and read in Josiah. Okay, that's going to be relevant because of what's coming up later. A revival of the true worship, celebrated Passover, and then died just 4 years before the first wave of the deportation of the Babylonians. So you know that Babylonians eventually does take Judah as the territory. Jerusalem gets destroyed after, I believe it's 3 waves. After 3 waves, the people gets captured. Remember in Genesis, this even said it about the people being captured. So this is what happens when a nation, we can profess everything, right? We can say, even America, right? We can say, we're under God, one nation under God, right? Say a whole bunch of things, right? We can have so many different leaders, good, bad. Here's the point. Maybe this is relevant. Doesn't matter who's in office. If we as a nation reject God, this is where we end up. Yeah. And there's no politician that can save us. That's right. Manasseh, Hezekiah, doesn't matter the heart of the person. If we as a nation, we want to go and what is right in our own eyes, right? Or do what's right in our own eyes, and we just continue to cast away the things of God or the thoughts of God, this is where we end up. We end up destroyed. Okay? All right, so that's the end of my notes. Okay? So, why do we need to know? Okay? Man cannot govern himself because he does not know himself. Okay? You shut out God out, even in democracy, will become the most awful tyranny the world has ever seen. God always causes some measure of light to shine in the midst of darkness. Remember we said, like, he appoints a right man and a right woman in the time, right? And it's hard to find, right? It's hard to find a man or woman. It's hard to find a good one, but they are out there, okay? So why do we need to do this? Without the prophecies, all is dark. Kingdoms only prosper, okay, here's the key, if their leaders hearken to the voice of God. Okay? Now, you can have any of your speculation, right? And this is my prayer, because this is really my prayer, because of this nation, right? And I people say, President Trump, he's a believer, and you can say all that. But if this is not valid, if this is not really being operational, I don't need the show tunes. Yeah. If your private life is really reflecting your public life, then we'll be all right. But as a church, even after the election, even after knowing, as a church, we still need to be moving. Absolutely. Because here's the opportunity to actually do something as a church. And remember I said, when we talked about Judges, there's been decades now, maybe years, that God has not been relevant, right? I lived in Maryland. I did a kids program. It was called Good News Club in Moravia Elementary. And they're 3rd grade to 5th grade. And I'm telling you, the atmosphere there was heavy. This was a few years ago. Wow. And just a block or two away was the school that took out the Bible and prayer. Okay? Wow. Now, here's the problem. Okay? Now, Satan has done a work. It's evident, right? We can say, oh, no, he doesn't know. He's done a work, right? It's so much so that even parents taking kids out of the school to teach them, right, at homeschool. So much so that now kids are questioning their genders. So much so that now everything is flowing. Everything is right. Everyone is right in their own eyes, right? When we lose the vision of God, it can lead to idolatry. And idolatry is not just, the two calves, two golden calves, and it could be a job, it could be our bank account, it could be what we drive. These idols can be ourselves. These idols could be the people, right? Like, if we lose the vision of God, we tend to go to idolatry. Remember we said about in Exodus, right? About the golden calf. Like, if we are designed to worship. That's the reality. We are designed to worship. If I'm not worshiping God, who am I going to worship? And there's times in my heart where I know it's hardened. And there's times that I know God is doing a work. And there's times that I am condemning myself and beating myself up. But the reason why I'm beating myself up because I know I have a spirit that says, hey, get back up. Right? The righteous man falls 7 times and gets up. Get back up. Keep moving. Keep growing. Right? There's a chiseling, there's a work that's happening in my life. And again, I'll say this again. When the vision, Solomon fell, not because of the woman, not because of the horses, not because of the gold, not because of the silver, not because of his temple bigger than the temple of God. He fell because he lost the mission, right? He stopped the outreach. Queen Sheba went all the way to see him, right? He stopped the outreach. It was more, he did 1,000 burnt offerings to only 3 times a year. I mean, the decline. God told him not to take women or multiple foreign women. Why? Because they worship other gods. Yes. His heart was turned. These little things this is why we don't make any provision for the flesh, right? A little thing can go on so long, right? I don't want to stay out of the presence of God, right? I don't want to be a stiff-necked believer, even though at times I can be. I don't want to be just Joshua, and being in the holy place and in the outer courts, even though it's in the tabernacle, right? Even though it's part of the place or the tent. Like, no, I want to be in the Holy of Holies when I know that I'm getting chiseling and worked on the daily. When he tells us, give us our bread, our daily bread. It's daily. God, I need you daily. I don't need you in convenience. I don't need you when I'm only in the high. I need you daily, regardless of my stance. And here's the beautiful thing about conditional. The promises. 1 Kings 8:56. None of his promises has ever failed. And when I rely on that, and when I take hold of that, and I believe in that, I go through my troubles. I go through my situations. I get through my problems. Right? Yeah. So, any chance someone found that verse about we can do that in a rap, but any chance that verse is found? 1 Kings 11, the Jeroboam rebellion. I thought I'd written it down. Oh, it's a lot of verses. Oh, it's a lot of verses. And he said, yeah. All right. Yeah. So we'll find that in the rap. Yeah. It definitely said that they didn't do anything that they didn't follow God. In maybe a phrase or. Okay. All right. So.
Where is that? None of his promises.
1 Kings 8:56. It's one of my favorite verses. Yeah, I thought I'd written it here. Okay, so, yeah, we'll find that later. Yeah, okay. All right, so, that's class 9. All right, Heavenly Father, just thank you for this time. Lord, yes, Lord, thank you. Thank you for your promises, Lord. Lord, let us not be familiar to the things that you call us to, Lord. Let us just be consistent, Lord. And even when we fail, we fall in the right direction. We fall in your grace. We fall in your everlasting arms. Help us, Lord. Help us in the chiseling and the hammering. Help us to continue to be allowing you to do a work. Help us, Lord. Help our situations individually, our circumstances, our health. This body, Lord. This body, Lord. Protect us, Lord. Thank you. Thank you, Lord. Pray for this nation. Pray for the president. Lord, help us, Lord. Help us to get back to you, Lord. We don't want to be one nation not under God. We see how Israel did that. We don't want to be that, Lord. We want to follow you, Lord. This is our time. This is when the church is active. This is what you made us for. In the dark world that it is, you appointed us to be in it. We come to you just seeking wisdom. That's all we do. We say, God, give us wisdom. For what? For your people. For us. The things we learn are not just for us, but for the people outside. And Lord, let us be walking epistles, Lord. Walking epistles. I didn't just say written. I said walking. We're active in what we do. Let the light be shown, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for this night. Thank you for this time.